They are four deep and very good players. The Sedin twins are two of the best in this draft, Patrick Steffen and Pavel Grendel, and all of the teams at the top felt that any of those four would be great players to pick. But obviously, there's teams like Vancouver who would like to see the Sedin twins together, and we believe at this point, then, that they've engineered a way of doing that.
Vancouver trades Brian McCabe and its first-round pick in 2000 to Chicago in exchange for Chicago's first-round pick in the 1999 draft. That's fourth overall. Tampa Bay trades its first-round pick overall, the first-round pick in today's draft, to Vancouver in exchange for the fourth pick overall in 99, previously acquired from Chicago, and two third-round picks in 1999, the 75th and the 88th overall. The third trade, Vancouver trades to Atlanta the first pick overall in this year's draft in exchange for the second pick overall this year and a conditional third-round pick in 2000. What that all means, the picks in this draft 1 through 4 will be made as follows. 1, Atlanta Thrashers. 2, Vancouver Canucks. 3, Vancouver Canucks. 4, Tampa Bay Lightning.
Vancouver Canucks are very proud to select from Marshall Spink, Team Moto of the Swedish Elite League, Daniel and Henrik Sedin.
Henrik Sedin, Lucas Krajicek, Henrik to Daniel, tip just wide, their patented slap pass. They've been in here for a minute, 40 seconds of relentless pressure.
Sedin is not English for punch me or headlock me in a scrum.
Moving to make sure that he kept that 2-on-1.
There's Daniel, another goal!
Here's number 2. So the next backhand pass to the hammer up to Daniel. Losing the line like Daniel. Coming in front. Shoots, scores! A hat-trick! Daniel Sedin with a gorgeous goal! And a little left wing forward behind the net to Daniel. Coming up front, Henrik scores! Henrik to Daniel! Canucks win! In 4 overtimes, Vancouver takes game 1, 5-4.
Olin, Henrik Sedin, Daniel Sedin, can't get a good shot away. Loose puck, Kessler can't get it. Henrik Sedin, what a shift. Daniel shoots, scores! At the end of a 2-minute and 20-second shift, Daniel Sedin makes it 2-0.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Agree or Disagree, the podcast. It is the controversial podcast that pushes you to think differently and connects with your community. We meet every Wednesday and Thursday on Spreaker.com, KEVOLE, SoundCloud.com, KEVOLE. You can follow me on Instagram, KEVOLE, Twitter, KEVOLE. You can like, agree, or disagree the podcast on Facebook. Add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. And you can also find me on Patreon, KEVOLE, and YouTube, KEVOLE. June 26th, 1999. It is a day that will be long remembered in Vancouver Canucks history. It is one that is now considered one of the worst drafts in NHL history. Vancouver Canucks GM Brian Burke pulled off one of the most unique trades in NHL history when he got the number 2 and the number 3 pick of the draft. Those picks, Daniel and Henrik Sedin. We fast forward to the week of Thursday, April 5th, Saturday, April 7th. The last home game, Thursday, is of the two greatest players in Vancouver Canuck history, and Saturday will be the final game in their great career. What do we make of the Sedins? What is next for the Canucks? What has been the season for the Vancouver Canucks? How was it? What's next? Where do we go from here? That is our topic today, as we're doing a season recap for the Vancouver Canucks on Agree or Disagree, the podcast. And joining me from Calgary is under Beardy Canuck. You can find him is Sean Good. How's it going?
Good, thanks.
Good. It's weird. I'm in Vancouver and you're in Calgary. Just weird. I bet you want to be right here at this point.
Much.
And up north in BC, somewhere in the north of BC, is Tyler Noble. How's it going?
Hi, guys. Yeah, going very well up in Terrace, to be precise.
Terrace, yes. Okay, that's why I was wondering where you were. I guess that we start with the Sedins and kind of from your perspective, what were your thoughts of the retirement, their season? What are you guys thinking? How are you feeling about everything?
Well, it's just, yeah, it's one of those things that just, it was going to happen. I was thinking either this season or next. This seems like a great way for them to go out. They don't seem like the type of guys who would want to do a full season farewell tour. So 3 games, I think, is just all about that they can handle. But it is just saying goodbye to 2 of the best players that have ever played for the Canucks, and it's and as someone who's been in Calgary and having to defend them against all the Flames and Oilers fans, it's an end of an era.
Yeah, I would agree that it's certainly an end of an era. The feelings I had when I heard the news was ones of bittersweetness. In a way, I'm kind of glad to hear the news, but at the same time, I mean, that's a huge void that's looming for the franchise, certainly in terms of leadership and both production on the ice. But really, the only way the team's going to move forward with a new core is if they retire, and they kind of talked about that. And if they think it's time, then it is time for them to enjoy retirement and spend some more time with their families and whatnot. But yeah, it gets us thinking about all the memories. We heard that in the intro. We went through how they became drafted second and third in the '99 draft. Some of the highlights. There's so many great moments, and to describe them as the 2 greatest players in Canuck history is certainly appropriate.
What is your favorite Sedin moment?
Oh, that's got to be the between the legs goal versus the Flames. That just to solidify the scoring race and everything. That just was so fun to watch, and then versus the Flames, for me, that just put a nice cherry on top of that season.
I think for me, I go back to the 2010 playoffs. They were playing Los Angeles in the first round, and Henrik went basically end-to-end and scored the go-ahead goal in the third period in Game 4. That was a series the Canucks trailed 2-1 and wasn't looking very promising, but when he got that goal, Henrik just exploded with emotion. We never seen the kind of emotion that on that goal before or since that I can remember, and they went on to win that series. So that was a big moment for the Sedins in terms of their leadership and being able to come through in big games.
Yeah, I remember that between the legs goal. That was, I mean, from a Flames perspective, certainly that was a tough pill to swallow. But also, I was at the opening game of 2016, and that was basically the shift number 2. I mean, 2007 was the shift 1, but they just couldn't get them off the ice, and it was and. You know, you hear a lot of that feedback is like this week from a lot of the interviews and the coverage. I'm sure that you guys have heard too, is like you had a game plan against them, but you couldn't really stop them in any way, shape, or form, really. You couldn't, like, you had ideas, but they were just on a different level.
Well, yeah, it's just we're gonna go from the normalcy of the behind the back pass, the no look pass to having to not have that as normal, because they made that look easy and normal and just part of a game of watching the Canucks.
The way they cycled, it wasn't about trying to stop them. It was about trying to contain them and hopefully get a mistake, a turnover, get out of the zone. And we've seen with some of, there's the shift and the shift point, 2.0, some of those longer shifts where they're able to maintain pressure. They basically didn't make a mistake until the puck went in the net. The opposition defense just got tired out there. I would just say the Sedins have really, in a lot of ways, revolutionized the game. Certainly with the cycle, the slap pass, even just that tip in from, or that deflection from the high slot. Some of the stuff that's now pretty common in the game. They really, in a lot of ways, brought that to the NHL.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they do certainly feel like there was a transition of the game from the Sedins. I mean, the word Sedinery never entered our vernacular before the Sedins came in. I think that they thought the game a little bit differently. I thought they brought a little bit of soccer to hockey, is a good way to describe it. And I also think in a way, and Sean, I think you talked about this kind of defending them towards Flames and Oiler fans. If you go back to 2011, there's that moment where Brad Marchand is punching Henrik countless amount of times in his face, and everyone was upset that he didn't do anything and nobody did anything, and he ended up getting a penalty. They almost redefined toughness in the NHL because it wasn't that you had to punch back. There was a certain way of toughness that came in the NHL because of the Sedins.
Well, yeah, like in redefining it, not even just that, but just the constant punishment they took, working that cycle down low in the corner, it blows my mind that people continue to this day can say that they weren't tough players. Just because you didn't punch back doesn't mean you weren't tough. So it's just, that's what it was. Is you had the blue collar Flames and Oilers fans just calling them out, but in all honesty, it was probably mostly jealousy more than anything else.
Do you think fans were jealous of the Sedins? Do you think that there was
I think they were jealous of the Canucks having the Sedins because, especially in that 08 through to 12 years and seasons, that they were just putting up so many points, and you had as you said the ability to try and take the puck off those guys, and you just had to wait them out, as Tyler said. That you had to wait them out and hope that they made a mistake, and a lot of the time they didn't.
I definitely think jealousy was a factor over the period of time that Sean mentioned. The Canucks really laid a lot of beatdowns on the other Canadian teams. Of course, they played Calgary and Edmonton a lot more than the Eastern Canadian teams, but most of the time the Canucks were winning in that period, and the Sedins were obviously a huge factor. So yeah, I think that's certainly a big part of their story in the NHL.
Do you think, what about the fan base here with the Sedins? Because it's now obviously a love-in. But they did not get off to a good start. Matt and I had a chat about this on the Flames podcast. Sam Bennett and Daniel Sedin have similar rookie stats. And I'm not saying that, two different players, but certainly wasn't necessarily a great start here for the Sedins. But I think overall, the way that they approached hockey and the way that they approached community, I think, had a lot maybe to change that. Would you agree with that? Or?
Oh, well, I don't know in the heat of the moment how much fans sort of think about the off-ice things, but one of the things that really helped the Sedins, of course, was coming in at a time when the West Coast Express was a thing. They didn't have to be at the forefront, but they were drafted second and third overall, and there's high expectations, and people are expecting big things right off the bat. So, they started off a little slow, and maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of a slow start, but the way they approached the conditioning aspect, and so that they could have those long shifts and tire down the defense, I think really helped them take it to the next level. And then once they figured out what they could and couldn't do and could get away with in terms of working that cycle, that's when the game changed, and that's when they started producing as first liners.
Yeah. And who is the best winger to play with the Sedins?
Well, for me, that one is Alex Burrows because he was able to do it for so long over a number of seasons. But I can't discount the season with Anson Carter. Obviously, they were very productive as a trio.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Burrows he did it for so long, and they took Burrows from basically at best third liner and turned him into one of the most productive scorers in the NHL in that 2-3 year stretch.
Yeah.
Well, he was very complimentary as well. I mean, he had that bite to his game that the Sedins don't have, so he was able to bring something to that line that they weren't bringing, and they were very effective.
Yeah, he brought that puck retrieval more than anything else. Actually, is what I saw is that when they did lose the puck, he was able to go back and get it, and then he also wasn't afraid to stand in front of the net and just and take all the punishment while they did all the work with the puck.
Yeah, he was certainly. One of those guys I think that fits in with that Sedin kind of, the Canuck fans will always love Alex Burrows, and the rest of the NHL always hated Alex Burrows for different reasons. But he certainly seemed to be the most longevity fit. I mean, yes, Anson Carter was never the same really after he played this with the Sedins that 1 year, which was interesting. And yeah, I think overall, it's hard to argue they're probably the two best. Well, they're the two highest scoring. I think they're the two best. I mean, and I think this week has been quite a interesting week. Yes, as we're recording this on Wednesday, yesterday the Golden Knights kind of did the handshake. The Thursday game, I imagine, is going to be really emotional. What are you expecting tomorrow for Thursday night or the home game? What were you expecting?
Well, I'm expecting it's now the national eyes on that with the broadcast now being national. They're going to put together a nice send off for them pre-game, and then and then it's just the Rogers going to be as it was versus Vegas. It's gone back 6-7 years to a place that with energy and just a place that gives you goosebumps when you're listening to the crowd.
Yeah,
that was the biggest thing I noticed when I was watching the game was that the energy in the arena was something that you hadn't seen in years. And that's what they brought, and that's what they incited from Canucks fans. And I see the game versus Arizona just being even more emotional, more energetic. It'll be up one, if not two levels, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. It'll definitely be an increase in intensity and emotion and excitement from the game Tuesday against Las Vegas. I would imagine that the team will come out with a very inspired effort. The Sedins they looked pretty determined there at the start of the game. They had a pretty long shift. They're going to be leaving it all out on the ice for the fans. It'll be hard watching. It'll be loud, but with the tributes and whatnot. I don't know. It's the end of the game it's kind of hard to know what to expect with that, but it should be a very great show at Rogers Arena on Thursday night.
And then you have Saturday, Hockey Night in Canada, Edmonton. And it's an interesting piece, I think. You have the two former faces, in a lot of ways, and Henrik and Daniel are two faces of the game, transitioning this game to a guy that is a face, but in an interesting way. I think it's a guy that's going to change the game in a different way when we look back on Connor McDavid. I think that moment of transition here is it's so interesting to me. The transition from not that it's not Connor's game, but I feel like Connor's going to be that transitional player that the Sedins became. He's such a different player than a lot of what we're seeing now in the NHL.
Yeah, absolutely. He does things that nobody else does, and that's what the Sedins have become known for and now are being celebrated for. But there are some similarities too. I mean, you look at some of McDavid's behind the back, no look passes to line mates, and that looks very Sedin-like. So it is, so there are a couple of parallels there. The dominance, obviously, the point totals. As long as McDavid is able to maintain a level of durability throughout his career, he'll definitely be the face of the game, at least in Western Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing with McDavid, he definitely has that sort of this very similar demeanor to the Sedins, where I don't think he likes being the center of attention, despite the fact that he's so skilled. So that there's that, but plus he just thinks the game at a different level and in a different way, and that's similar to the Twins, but he's just going to take the game to a next level with his speed and skill.
Okay. Too bad he doesn't have anyone to play with, but that's a whole other whatever, I'm sorry.
If they give him somebody to play with, then the rest of the team doesn't have anybody to play with.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's a problem.
There is that issue.
That issue there, yes. Well, yeah, so that's this week, Thursday, Saturday here with the final steps of the Sedins, which leads us to where we are now. And I guess we kind of have to look back to look forward in a sense. On a scale of 1 to 10, I know in terms of the record, this is a brutal record. But do you look at this season as somewhat a successful season? In that you started to see some development from some guys and some answers about other guys?
Yeah, with Besser coming in, you've got the Canucks now have the next generation of players, for him and Horvat, who are putting up points. Besser just is the elite sniper winger that every team wants desperately. Horvat's taken just leaps and bounds strides, and I honestly think you can't dismiss him as a potential number one center going forwards. Everyone's talking about Pettersson after the last draft, but I think Horvat's got just as good an opportunity to be the guy going forwards, especially with Besser on his wing.
For me, on a scale of 1 to 10, would give this a 6. I would just saying, 10 winning the Stanley Cup, 9 getting deep into the playoffs, 8 making the playoffs, 7 getting close to the playoffs. I mean, 6, it's better than being worse than last year, even though the standings are going to show that the Canucks finish very low again. Just generally speaking, it looks like most of the people that you were hoping to see take a step forward have taken a step forward. Brock Besser, certainly a huge step forward. I mean, where he's at right now, in a lot of ways, makes up, I think, for the Canucks failing in the draft lottery the last couple of years. And we might end up talking about that later. But, he comes in, he's picked 23rd overall in his draft year, and is playing like somebody that was picked in the top 10. And just gives the Canucks a lot of hope. Even just the fact that there is hope for the fans going forward is progress, I think.
Yeah. Oh, if we were going to say something, Sean?
I was saying, I think a 6 or a 5 is a good ranking for the season. Because there's still a lot of questions, but when you've got the bright spots of Besser and Horvat, and then we saw the debut of Demko, who is the heir apparent in net going forwards, and then as well as seeing the prospects ripping it up elsewhere it's quite promising looking forward.
One reason it's hard to rate this any higher than a 6 is that the limited depth for the team really showed, especially when Bo Horvat went down, and initially after Brock Besser was shut down for the season. The Canucks have put together some wins lately, but the first little while thereafter, number 6 hit the disabled list there, so to speak. It was not very pretty. So the limited depth still shows, but hopefully next year with the state of the prospect pool, that will be another improvement for the team.
Okay, so where are the questions here for your guys for the Canucks? If Jim Benning was sitting beside me, what would be one of the questions you would want to ask him?
Well, I want to know what the plan is for the blue line, because they've got basically the same group all signed and ready to come back next year. But to me, that blue line does not look good enough. Are they expecting a big upswing from Stetcher, and maybe some more development from Pouliot? But I just don't see the blue line being good enough, and I feel like they need to find a way to fix that over the next couple years, so that they don't turn into basically another version of the Oilers, where you've got a high-powered offense and no blue line.
I definitely agree that defense is more of a concern than other areas for the Canucks next year. Really, this season just leaves me with feeling like there's more to be desired from all of them. I'm quite concerned with Chris Tanev's durability. He's injured quite often. He's a guy you're really relying on. So if he's going to miss a lot of playing time, how do you address that? Ole Uolevi, we've seen him at the World Junior Championship. We don't hear that much about him outside of the World Junior Tournament. If he keeps progressing and he can get into the lineup for the next year or two, that would certainly help things. But, is Stetcher going to be able to take another step forward? I don't know. I have a hard time imagining that. So defense certainly is a concern.
Benning says Stetcher is part of the core.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys buying that?
I like his energy. I like his effort. Defensively, he's solid. I don't see him being much more than maybe a number 4. I don't see the offense out of him. I don't see it, and that's what'll separate him from becoming the part of being a good part of a core going forwards.
Yeah, it seems like he's not taking as many chances offensively this season. Maybe that's because last season he got burned a number of times doing that or whatever. I'm not sure what the thought process is for him. But, yeah, is he knocking people's socks off? I don't think so.
No. What happened to Ben Hutton?
Oh, that's I honestly think it's just his confidence got shot a bit, and then his conditioning's not up to snuff.
Yeah, and he certainly lost the trust of the coach, and then that just becomes a snowball effect in terms of confidence.
Is he a guy that you think can rebound here, or is he a guy that has to be? Maybe we'll talk a little bit about trades later also too. But I think maybe there's a couple of guys here we could talk about in terms of trade options. But is Ben Hutton a guy that you could get something for? Or is this a guy that you can see redeemable?
I think it'd be tough to get anything of substance back for Hutton with his contract being $2.8 million. That's a tough sell. So if they can work with him and try and find a way to get his confidence back and his conditioning up, I think I could see him rebounding next year and having a much better season. His underlying analytics and fancy stats are quite good. I just wonder if he can actually put it all together.
I would agree that a trade is something that would be difficult to accomplish. I would think the organization is going to consider it, especially given what's happened this week. Ashton Sautner gets the more formal recall. He was brought up on an emergency basis, stays, and plays against Vegas. Hutton, a healthy scratch for that one. So it really raises some questions as to whether he's even going to be part of the team next year. But I think it is a little soon to just completely give up on him, given that there's a new coach and changes and different people to play with. But, Ben Hutton's not that young anymore either. He was a bit of a late bloomer coming to the NHL. So So I do wonder whether he's going to be able to find his game.
Yeah, it's interesting because he seemed to be a guy that had some, under Willie, was really a guy that seemed to be blossoming, but I don't know. Yeah, him and Travis Green are not on the same page. I mean, there was even an interview where Travis had asked what's the status of Ben, and Ben didn't skate, and then on the radio they were saying actually Ben is skating right now. So I don't even think they even knew when they were in the same room together. It just seems really, it's quite fascinating to me. Tyler, you talked about Tanev, and he's been a subject of trade rumors all along here. Would you A, trade him, and B, what do you actually think you can, well, both of you guys can jump in, what do you think you can get for Tanev?
Well, if you're going to trade him, presumably that would mean to try and upgrade in another area. And, I mean, we're sitting here talking about how defense is an area where they need to improve. So if they were able to bring back an NHL-ready defenseman and then some other pieces are involved in the deal, that's a possibility. But I would suspect that Tanev's going to stay. He has playoff experience with the Canucks. He's becoming a veteran on this team. And when he is healthy, he's a solid stay-at-home defenseman.
Yeah, Tanev just makes everyone who he plays with better. I think, yeah, they'd have to get a deal that knocks their socks off for him to be traded, I think. I definitely think that they've got a plan for him, at least in the preseason, to probably pair him with Hugo Levy and just see how that looks. Because he's such a calming influence, and having him as a bit of a mentor for Hugo Levy coming over, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's something that I would do. But I don't think they are against trading Tanev. I just think they'll have to get the exact right deal.
So you're not thinking of forward, because there was always this conversation, well, let's see if we can target a Mitch Marner for a Chris Tanev or a William Nylander. You're thinking more D.
I think that's an interesting option. I'm not sure Toronto would entertain that. But I think that, again, it just comes down to what the right package, right? And it just like I said, I like Tanev as a calming influence on these young guys. Like even when Hutton played with him, Dave, that was a really good pairing. And I do really like that idea of pairing him with Hugh Levy and seeing what happens, because I think that would be a good pair to help bring on one of the top prospects in the Canucks pool.
Yeah. So do you guys both have high expectations of Hugh Levy? And was it a? No, I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to ask the Matthew Tkachuk question, because I think it's to me. I think there's 6 to 1, a half a dozen another. Yeah, Matthew would have been great here too, I'm sure, and it's maybe frustrating, but defense takes time to develop too. So I think it's a tough call. Anyway.
Yeah. It's not an apples to apples, oranges to oranges comparison, right? It is tougher. I have a harder time judging defensive talent coming through the system, but everything you seem to hear from a guy like Craig Button on TSN seems to indicate that Hugh Levy is going to be fine. So I guess we just need to give it more time. But next year's camp and preseason is really crucial for him to make a splash, I think.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it too. Is like this next year is, I won't say make or break, but it's pretty close to that for him, because if he's not at least pushing for a spot, then that pick doesn't look good at all.
I guess we'll see in the draft this upcoming summer how many defensemen they take and how soon in the draft they do, to get a sense of where they feel they're at with their defensive depth, and Hugh Levy in particular.
Yeah. Where are you on Eric Gudbranson?
Oh, he's he's got everything on paper that you want in a defenseman, but again, he just hasn't been able to put it together as a Canuck. And then he's also never been one of those the new age defensemen that teams are starting to go towards, as opposed to the old guys. He's more of an old school defenseman, just big, bruising and off the glass and out, and that's not the game anymore. And he's struggled to try and keep up with it. The contract is a bit leaves a lot to be desired, and who knows? Maybe if he can actually play a season healthy, maybe he can prove us wrong. But I'm not holding my breath.
The Canucks gave up a pretty significant asset in Jared McCann to bring over Eric Goodbranson from Florida. So I think it's going to take a lot for them to give up on him at this point. I like him because he is big and tough. When Kevin Bieksa left, a lot of toughness left the Canucks defense core on his way out. But I would agree that the way the game is being played now maybe doesn't work to Goodbranson's favor down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so you got I see it Stetcher, Pouliot. We have to talk about Edler, because I think this is a guy kind of flying under the radar here. I think he's taken a lot of people are like, get rid of him. Why are you not giving up your no trade? This, that, and the other thing. And he's been the best defenseman in the Canucks this year. He's had a really good year.
Yeah, he's been fantastic for them this year, with all things considered. I don't see him waving to go anywhere. Maybe after this season, because I think he's got 2 years left. But I don't think he's the Swedes seem to like to stick in one spot and not uproot and go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's here for the long haul, and I don't think the Canucks are worse off for that.
For me, Alex Edler is a guy that at times drives me nuts, I have to admit, with his defensive play. But overall, he is a huge piece for the Canucks and has had a pretty good season. He is one piece back there that can generate some offense, and he logs a ton of minutes on a core that needs a guy to log a ton of minutes. So Alex Edler's he's had a pretty good season overall, even though there's the odd player or two that makes me wonder what he's thinking.
Yeah, solid guy. Let's talk about the goaltending. I guess, what did you think of Demko, and where is he on your depth chart? Let's start there.
I think he's number 3 right now, but I think there's a very good chance that he could push past Nielsen or whoever they bring in to back up Markstrom next year. He looked really good. He's got good mobility. He's big. Giving him that one game to see what the next level looks like, it was really good. I think that's going to help him this summer take that next step, and I think by the end of next year he'll be up with the Canucks full time.
He's number 3 for me as well. I don't think he's quite there yet. Very encouraging result in the first game. It would have been a shame if they didn't pull out the win there after the way it kind of come apart late in the third period. But now he has a sense of what it's like to be at the NHL level, and he can take that back and try to work on some things and take his game to the next level. But I don't think he's quite there yet to be the full-time backup.
I liked the fact that he asked to come up for a game. That was one of his desires, is I want to play one game in the NHL just to get the feel of it. That's really smart, I think. And that's, I think, will help going forward.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of humming and hawing, especially within the fan base, about whether it's a good idea. I was always on the give him 1 or 2 games, because I think there's a story about Corey Schneider when he first came up, and he came out and challenged a shooter in his first or second NHL game, and was too aggressive and got beat because of that. And it was an eye-opening experience for him, where he's like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I can't do that, and I've got to tone down the aggressiveness on this." And then you look at him now, and he's the starting goaltender in NHL. So it's I think there is something to be said about showing him what the next level looks like, and letting him use that to help drive his summer training.
Getting him up, of course, is always a bit of a logistical challenge, because most teams don't have 3 goalies on their roster at any one time. The Canucks, in this case, had the convenience of an illness, emergency call-up situation, and it was convenient for them late in the season, when they aren't playing for a playoff spot or anything, to bring him up and finally give him that shot.
So based on what I'm hearing from both of you, you said whoever is the backup, whoever they're bringing in as the number 2. So Nielsen's not back next year in your mind?
I think if they can find a taker for Nielsen, they'll move him on. I think he's in the same camp as Hutton, and he's not in the good books with Travis Green. But if not, they'll keep him for the final year of his contract.
I think it's likely he stays. There's no debating that Markstrom's the number 1, and a backup's a backup. As long as you can put that guy in there and get a capable outing from your backup on a certain number of games per season basis, that's fine.
Cool. So, are we happy that Markstrom's number 1?
I think he's a good transitional goalie for the Canucks until Demko's ready. But I also think that I still think he's got another level to go to. I think the past few games I've seen him be better than he has been all season. And I think if you look at Hellebuyck in Winnipeg, he went through a lot of struggles last season, and then he comes in this season after reviewing it all and doing some training in the summer, and he became an all-star. I'm not saying Markstrom will do that, but I still think there's another level that Markstrom can go to if he takes this season and looks at it and looks at what went wrong and makes some tweaks to his game.
I think that this season was an improvement for Markstrom over last season, and if I'm not mistaken, he didn't have any shutouts prior to this season. So he's taken a step forward, and I really love the intensity that he plays with out there. He's always in the game. He's on the officials. He's on his teammates when that's required. It's a guy that looks the part of a number 1 to me, even though for more.
Let's see how many shutouts he has. How many shutouts does he have this year?
He has 2.
2, yes.
As far as I can see.
Yeah, and none last year. Yeah, so those first 2 of his career, right? Let's go to the forward ranks, and then we'll talk Coach GM and what you're hoping in the offseason here. Which forward flew under the radar for you the most this year?
That's a good question. Forwards that fly under the radar. I'm going to say that. It's not. I don't know if the "fly under the radar" is the right phrase for Darren Archibald, but really nice to see him come in and finally gain some traction. Looks like he is a piece that's going to be there to stay next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Archie. He's one of those, like, he's basically took the Derek Dorsett role and has done quite well with it. He's the guy that goes in and just throws his body around and helps create energy. But I think for me, I honestly think it's. I know he's still getting a lot of press just because he's young, but Jake Virtanen's had a solid developmental year in terms of turning from very much a question mark into someone who looks like he's going to be part of at least the middle six role going forward.
Very big bounce back year for Virtanen. I mean, last year, if you were asking me about Virtanen, I'm going to be calling him a dud. I mean, he was with Utica, wasn't looking very good. But got a fresh start with the off season. Came in and looked very motivated in the preseason. Had a number of strong performances in the preseason, and then this year in the regular season, it looks like his game's coming together. So a long way to go for him to become a really, I think, dominant forward. But if this guy turns into a third line forward for this team when it's hopefully closer to contending for the cup, then then it's going to be a pick that works out for them.
Yeah, Virtanen's had a good year. I think he's been through a lot, probably personally and professionally. I think having Green here over Willie, I think, has been a huge improvement for him. I think the one guy that I was impressed with that certainly has been consistent has been I think that Tyler. People were mad about the Vanek not getting draft picks for Thomas Vanek, but you can't argue with what UC Jokinen and Tyler Mott have done, can you?
Jokinen's done very well in the games he's played. You might even make an argument to try and bring him back and be the next year's sort of Vanek for the Canucks. And then Mott, he's still young. Like there's still some growth to go there. He can skate, but I think there definitely is a bottom six forward in Tyler Mott. But he definitely needs to work on reading the game a little bit better though.
I'm happy with the return for Vanek, those two players. A lot of people wanted a draft pick, and I was hoping to see some kind of draft pick added for the upcoming draft. But it's a return that I think is fair, and Mott is still a younger guy with some potential. So we'll see how it goes next season. But Jokinen, yeah, I agree. When he's played, he's done what he's supposed to.
I think he could be a good sort of like skilled winger for potentially if Gaudette stays up next year.
Yeah, what have we thought of Gaudette? Is he? I know he's not putting up the Brock Besser numbers, but has he shown some impression?
Yeah, he's definitely looking like I think he's where I expected. I never expected the Brock Besser numbers from Gaudette, but he's playing a hard game. He's playing a smart game, and within a year or two, I think he's definitely going to be a big part of this team going forward.
For me, Gaudette, it's still a pretty small sample to go off of. So he was a guy that in the lower levels in the NCAA certainly put up a performance that was deserving of getting an opportunity here before the season was over. And perhaps it's a little bit tentative so far, just feeling his way around the NHL level here. But I'm excited to see what he can do next year.
Yeah, I think he's not someone I would like pen into the lineup, but he's definitely someone who's going to push for a spot next year.
Mm-hmm.
What about Leipzig?
I really liked that trade. I thought that was a very good, smart targeting of a player by Benning. I like his tenacity. He's made some really smart plays. I think he's got the potential to be like that third piece to a top six line where you've got two skilled players and he can be the puck retrieval guy and then can still make good passes to those guys and get them the puck.
I'm impressed with the level of energy he's been able to bring to the Canucks forward group. It's a guy that has been with a couple of teams now and didn't stick, so he's come in very hungry and has shown some flashes of some impressive skill and speed, and the Canucks really didn't have to give up too much for him. As Philip Holm goes to the Vegas Knights, so I'm pleased with Leipzig so far. That's all I can say about it.
Does it make a guy like Barchi expendable to you, or do you still want Barchi on the team next year?
I think Barchi definitely becomes some trade bait for sure going into the summer now that they've got not only Leipzig, Goldobin starting to show well again. They've got Lind coming up and starting to play. Dahlin coming over from Sweden as well. There's a lot of depth and players who will be pushing up the lineup in the next year or two. Barchi could be there, but I definitely could see him being traded in the offseason.
My feeling is he is part of the plan going forward, but is a guy that might get pushed a little bit here now by some of these younger players showing up, and that's kind of what the Canucks want, right? I mean, they want the depth to be such that guys are pushing each other to be better and earn those opportunities.
Yeah, it's an interesting. As a Flames watcher, Barchi is an interesting guy to watch, but I think he's been more of a fit in Vancouver, but I've also seen why he wasn't a fit in Calgary here too at times. Yeah, you can see sort of the pros and the cons with him. All right, let's talk about the coach. And I think the best way to, I think what I want to ask is, what is the one difference that you've seen from Travis Green from Willie Desjardins? There's probably more than one.
Yeah. Well, I think the one I noticed is he's not afraid to push buttons. He's not afraid to ruffle feathers. Willie just seemed to be a little more behind the scenes, like quiet, and tried to coach it in more subtle ways. Green's a little more in your face, but he also seems to get sort of the line. He's not throwing sticks. He's not throwing tantrums like Glenn Gulletson in Calgary, but he's still in the faces of players who he expects a lot of.
He definitely is, I think, a coach that's harder on his players than Willie Desjardins was. Let's remember, he sat Brock Besser for the first 2 games of the season. So this is a coach that says to the younger players, you're going to earn your opportunities. And I think that they've responded to that. He's definitely pulled the right levers. And I don't like to put too much into what a coach's body language looks like behind the bench when you're watching a game. I mean, we're just watching the game. I watch most of them on TV. Don't really have a sense of what it's like being a player sitting in front of him on the bench. But watching Willie Desjardins, I think by the end we were all left with the feeling like he was out of answers. He didn't have any more ideas. And so the timing of the coaching change was probably right. And Green's worked with a lot of these guys in Utica, so he's got a good relationship there with most of them. We've talked about some where Hutton, for example, where he doesn't have that same kind of rapport. But, I think it was the right move to go to him, and we'll see what he can do next season.
Yeah, be very interesting. And right now, on a side note, it looks to me from sitting here in Vancouver, Sean, and you're in Calgary, but it looks to me that Gullikson is a guy that doesn't. It's interesting you said Tyler Willie D, because it feels like Gullikson doesn't have any answers right now in Calgary, and there's some interesting parallels there. Anyway,
yeah, but he's I don't see him lasting.
Yeah,
I don't either. And you brought up how he's had the tantrums, and that's been well documented. I mean, what other levers does he pull? What other cards does he have to play? I don't know. I mean, and the way the Flames have kind of faded here in the last month of the season or so. Doesn't look very good for the coach.
No. It'll be a very interesting. Monday's going to be a very interesting day in Calgary for sure. I think on a number of different levels there, because even from the players' perspective, I think that'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah, not to get off track too much here, but it is a difficult choice, I think, for that organization, because they haven't had him there for very long, and they've already changed coaches under this current general manager, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yes.
They've got a tough one on their hands there. If they decide to bring him back, that could be a tough sell in that market.
I think you're right. You look at a guy like, Louis Eriksson's been a tough sign here. We're not going to dispute that, but Troy Brouwer has been on 4 different lines for the Flames. He's been on the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 line. He has 6 goals. It's inexplicable to many Flame fans how this guy's even got on the power play. And just some of the strategic things that Gullickson has done, it's been a head scratcher in a number of different ways. Like TJ Brody's still on the left side when the guy clearly can play better on the right and is more comfortable on the right. Just a bunch of different things. I think it's just, and the way that this team has played the last month, it's hard. You can't bring Gullickson back, but you really do need to bring back someone. And I mentioned this on the Flames podcast as well. If you're going to make that change, you have to pick someone that's better than Gullickson. Now, Gullickson was better than Hartley. I'll say that. Because the Hartley's system, that was a tire fire. And quite frankly, the Flames won that series over the Canucks that year. That was by accident. That was a tire fire team that had no system and probably no business winning any games. But they somehow did it. But Gullickson was better than Hartley. But I do think you need to be better than Gullickson, though, too.
Yeah, they've. I just look at the depth on. They've got 2 really good lines up front, and then they've got arguably on paper one of the top 4 defense in the league, and you can't seem to find a way to get in the playoffs. Yeah, he's there. I can't see him coming back.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting. Monday is going to be very interesting in Calgary. Let's talk about betting. There's been a lot of pro, a lot of con. Back at the trade deadline, there was a huge statement about the media and how they treated Benning. I remember the media asking, did you ask about draft picks, and almost critiquing him. And what have we thought? Has he come up okay? Where are we with Jim Benning? He got a contract renewal, so he's here.
I think he hasn't quite grasped the nuances of being a GM. Like he's a good scout, but he hasn't found a way to get more draft picks. And then I would say the pro scouting definitely needs a lot of work under his regime, because you look at most of the free agent signings have not gone well, and then the trades, there's been a few decent ones, but majority of them have been average at best.
I would say that this season was a steadier year for Benning, and I'll say year going back to the last off season. Steadier compared to the first 3 years of his time as the general manager. I just wish that he was a better communicator. The fans, and especially the media, in a Canadian market, just dissect everything that gets said. And he's not very good at explaining himself, which just, I think, makes the job harder for him. I would agree that the pro-level scouting is meh. The amateur, I'm very encouraged by. I think what got him the extension is that he and, I suppose, Trevor Linden were able to sell ownership on the prospect pool. And you know what? There's no quick fix to the type of reconstruction of the team that the Canucks needed with a lot of the bigger, longer-term, no-trade contracts that this management group inherited. I think a lot of people in the Canucks fan base are looking for a quick fix. I don't believe that exists. A lot of people saying throw the kids in there, just play them, don't play veterans. Well, I think we've seen in other places that hasn't gone very well. Edmonton in particular, I think Toronto did that for a while, but now they've got the right mix of veteran and young talent. So going forward, I think with Jim Benning, we can see a little bit of light down the tunnel now that you can get a better sense of what the team's going to look like with a new core. It's clear who the foundational pieces are, and I'm referring to Besser and Horvat.
Not Sutter.
Well, and Sutter, I mean, he's there, and that they gave up quite a bit for him, but that doesn't mean he's going to be there 2 or 3 years from now. I mean, he's part of the transition for sure, but maybe going forward down the road, maybe he won't be. It just depends on what comes through the system. But that's how I would sum it up for Benning. I mean, not spectacular, but steadier than in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. His I would say even going back to last trade deadline, the direction has definitely been where this team needs to go. But like I said, there's too many deals that didn't quite go as planned that you can't ignore.
Well, like which ones?
Well, I would say you the good Branson extension. And then just going back and farther is the trading for good Branson, adding picks to get players like Pouliot and all that. While it might be what it needed to get the job done, it's hard to sell that to a lot of fans, because that, as everyone wants, is they want the draft picks, they want the lottery picks.
Yeah, and the one trade deadline where he was unable to trade both Verbata and Hamhuis, they did have the no trade clauses, but to not be able to move one of the two, that's definitely a big miss. I mean, I know organizations want to be careful not to be seen as just discarding guys for nothing. I think that's something that the Edmonton Oilers are coming under fire for now. They gave away such big pieces. They got something in return, but very little, and now it's leaving a bitter taste in people's mouths. And I don't think that reflects very well on the organization when it comes to free agents signing there and wanting to commit to a certain place. I think with Hamhuis, given his BC connections and the fact that he probably left money on the table to sign with the Canucks and be part of the run to the 2011 Stanley Cup final, I think that one was one that they had to be a little more careful with. But Verbata, I would have liked to see them get something for the guy, and it didn't work out. So, those are some things that Jim Benning's going to take flack for, and it was alluded to earlier here that I think the one at the top of the list that isn't working out is the Louis Eriksson signing. I mean, with the Sedins gone and some younger Swedish talent coming to the Canucks, maybe that kind of was part of the plan, is to have him there and be a veteran presence and be there for presence as opposed to lighten up the scoreboard. But the Louis Eriksson thing is probably one that Jim Benning would like a do-over on.
Do you buy him out?
I don't think that contract's buyoutable at this point. I think you need to get into the last
couple of years.
2 years at least, yeah.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's right at this point. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember that cap hit extends for double the length of time remaining. So that's a tough one to swallow.
Yeah.
And the Canucks still have to keep an eye on what Luongo's doing, because the closer he gets to finishing that deal, if he retires within the last 2 years of that deal, then the Canucks are stuck with a really hefty dead cap space.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big gamble to run up the tab of paying guys not to play for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. Okay, so as of this recording, the record's 34-10. They have an 8.5% chance of winning the lottery. For your information, the Calgary Flames, with that Travis Hamonic deal, have a 2.5%. And the Edmonton Oilers, who, if they get this first pick, I think I am literally going to quit, have a 6.5% at this point in time. How bad do you? Well, I mean, obviously, Dahlin is a game changer. Like that's obvious. But what are we hoping here for this lottery if we don't get first? What happens here? Do you hope for top 5?
Top 5 would be nice. I think I was seeing some speculation on who the Canucks like, and I think they've got Brady Tkachuk at ranked in that 3-4 spot. So it could be interesting to see if they draft in anywhere in that 2-3-4 spot if they go for the younger Tkachuk.
I'm hoping for anywhere in the top 3. It means they actually got lucky and actually moved into one of those spots. I think that's a win for a franchise that's, put their fans through a lot of frustration over the years. So, of course, picking first would be a game changer. Something that's never happened before for the Canucks. They'd be able to add a piece that they could really use and address their defense. But picking anywhere in the top 3 would certainly be a boost, and it would be something that the organization can sell to the fans in terms of adding to that hope factor.
Yeah, it's and I think fans shouldn't discount getting another adding some more top end wingers to that to the prospect pool, because as much as we've got Besser, and then the Colin's looking good, and Jonathan Dahlin's looking good. Maybe they don't pan out, and the more people you got, more guys you got coming up through the ranks that can push, is the better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then of course, I mean, depth is just good, even in terms of being able to make trades and address other needs as they come up down throughout the season.
Yeah. In terms of other stuff to do, we talked about possible trade pieces: Berchi, Tanev, Hutton. Who would you? Excuse me. Where do you want them to go after some free agents? Do you want some big names here? What are you kind of thinking for in terms of the NHL veteran replacements? Do you have some guys in mind that you're kind of like, hey, he would be really good on in a Canuck jersey?
If they can somehow find a way to convince John Tavares to come,
that'd be epic, eh?
That would be great, but outside of that, in terms of the top guys, they're all going to want term, and it's tough to give term when you're looking at the rebuild. So you don't want to be tying money up that Besser will need. They'll need to sign Besser later on, potentially. If everything goes right, Pettersson, Dahlin, Lind. So you don't really want to tie that money up long term. So for me, it's just if they can't convince Tavares, then they gotta get creative and maybe try and convince one of those secondary guys to sign for 2-3 years.
It is interesting to raise the idea of John Tavares as something that Steve Simmons out of Toronto had floated out on Twitter, and it'd be great if you could get him, but I just don't see him wanting to come to Vancouver. I don't think they're close enough to winning for him to see that as an attractive idea. So, and the other thing about free agency you got to remember is you're always inherently overpaying in free agency to get a guy. So, Canucks, even though they're going to get the $14 million in cap space with the Sedins retiring, that's going to disappear fast if you sign a guy of Tavares's stature. So I would hope that if they do want to tinker in free agency, it's something more like a Thomas Vanek type of signing, a guy that comes in and brings some experience, fills a bit of a void in terms of experience. Vanek in particular, I mean, if they could find a way to bring him back, I wouldn't be disappointed with that. Of course, at the right dollar amount.
Yeah.
But to go and blow a bunch of money on and make another Louis Eriksson type signing would just be a real head scratcher for people.
What about a guy like Michael Grabner? Because that's a name that the Flames have been talking a little bit about. Flames fans have been talking about going after a Grabner. What about a guy like that here?
It'd be interesting. He's still got wheels, and he can pot some goals here and there. I think if you're going to go for a winger, you got to go for someone who's got a little more who can score a little bit more than he can. I would go for a James Neal or a David Perron just to add some scoring depth to the for next year and maybe a couple years. But again, those guys are probably going to look for terms, so it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think that the lower key the Canucks approach free agency, probably the better it is for them long term in terms of cap implications.
Right. Yeah, just thinking about that. And let me toss one more name out, because he hasn't really been linked here, and I don't know if he'd be a great fit. But a guy like Alex Galchenyuk.
That's an interesting one. Montreal, I mean, they may be in the mood to make a deal. I mean, I think that they're at the point of having to blow that thing up substantially.
Yeah.
So that one's an interesting idea. Well, I'd like to see that.
It just comes again. That just comes down to what's the cost of acquisition there.
Yeah.
I have no idea what Montreal would be looking for, because they need to rethink how they're doing that, and they're desperate for a top line center. And Galchenyuk, as much as he's not panned out or struggled in the last couple of years, he's still got some name cachet and some potential left in the bank there. So I think it's still going to be a high cost to get, but if you can get the right deal, definitely that would be a very intriguing deal to make.
Yeah, it's certainly this offseason, I think, is about getting that draft pick. Hopefully, the number one. Hopefully, it's a Dahlin. If not, I think there's still some pretty good pieces. I mean, this isn't a great draft, but it's certainly not a 1999 draft, and I think it's a better draft than last year, I think, overall. So I think there's some good pieces here. I mean, Brady, if you get a Brady Tkachuk, I think that's a good fit. And Dahlin ultimately would be a game changer. But yeah, I think it's about getting prospects and signing smart type of free agencies. I mean, Vanek would be a good fit, a UC Jokinen, something like that. Because, I mean, I don't see necessarily a vision of playoffs, but I don't, next year, I don't know. But
yeah, I think Linden and Benning have definitely been making the rounds, and they've been talking about going with more of a youth movement next year, and they'd be happy with being a young team, and I think they even said really young. So I think unless they can find one of those second tier free agents willing to take a 2 to 3 year deal, I think we're definitely going to be seeing a much younger team next year.
Cool. Yeah. Is there anything else we need to talk about here?
Well, I mean, I think just an overall comment on the season. We talked before about it being, I think, a 6 out of 10 on the 1 to 10 scale. A couple of highlights for me. Obviously, Besser at the All-Star weekend was really exciting. It was first time in a while. You know, you could feel really proud to be a Canucks fan amongst the entire hockey world. Here's this guy. You know, people are talking about the Canucks. There was a lot of positivity that surrounded Brock Besser. You know, people love the flow. He's a low-key guy otherwise. Went to the All-Star weekend, got to mingle a little bit with the top names in the game. Remember after the accuracy shooting competition, him and Sidney Crosby talking things over. I mean, I thought all that was just terrific. Another one I want to highlight was the Hockey Night in Canada home game against the Maple Leafs back in December, I believe it was. That was fresh off Daniel Sedin picking up his 1,000th point.
Yes.
They celebrated that before the game. It's the big audience. It's the early game on Hockey Night. He got the recognition that he deserved from a national audience. The telecast talked a lot about Brock Besser versus Austin Matthews. And they did trot out Derek Dorsett before the game there after he was forced into retirement. I know I was shedding some tears watching that. And the Canucks came out and had a really inspired effort and got a win. So I thought that was really good and showed that they got the fire in them. They just need a little more experience. And I think we might see something like that in this final home game for the Sedins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some highlights, and Besser at the All-Star game is definitely one of them. And just seeing him and him being able to just highlight what he does well in front of everyone just really sort of solidified the Canucks fans' feelings on him and all that. And then looking forward to tomorrow's game versus the Coyotes to say goodbye to the Twins, and then looking forward to the future, and hopefully one thing we talked about was hopefully that they transition the captaincy over to Horvat within the next year.
Yeah, that was one thing. I mean, do you want it to be Horvat? There's suggestion that no one will be a captain next year. They'll just rotate that. What do you think?
I think it's quite possible that they go without one for a season. But to me, Horvat is the obvious choice. So if it's the obvious choice, we've seen this with other teams. Just move on with it, I guess. I mean, Horvat is the first of the younger players that came there, and it looks like he's been groomed properly and is ready for that role, ready to take that step forward.
Yeah, I could definitely see them going into next year without a captain, but I think Horvat, if he's not ready, will be real soon.
Yeah. By the way, the other thing I want to point out here is Brock Besser is still second in goals and rookie scoring, 29. He's still fifth in points with 55. I don't see a reason why he doesn't get a vote for a Calder. I mean, it's obvious it's Barzal. Like, I'm not going to dispute that Matthew Barzal's had an incredible year. He's the rookie of the year. But I don't see why you don't put him in the top three.
Yeah, well, what's interesting for me is that I think that the second and third best rookies are currently out injured. You've got Barzal running away with it, but then you've got Besser and then Charlie McAvoy in Boston. I think are the 2-3 there. But that's nothing to knock on like Kyle Connor in Winnipeg just passed Besser in goals, and he's got 30. So it's been a really good season for rookies, and we were lucky enough to watch one of them.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, I think that being Besser is deserving of being at least one of those three finalists. But Barzal is definitively the rookie of the year.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not saying that. All right, how do we follow you guys on Twitter? You guys both talk a lot of Canuck stuff, so.
I'm Beardy Canuck 03.
And my handle is the more simple @TNoble. That's TNOBLE.
Cool. And of course, you can follow me, KEVOLE, SoundCloud.com, KEVOLE, Spreaker.com, KEVOLE, Podbean, I forgot to mention that, KEVOLE. Subscribe on YouTube, like, agree, or disagree the podcast on Facebook, add me as a friend as well. Thanks, guys, for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Okay, we will talk to you all soon.
Thanks very much.